I'll never forget the first time I realized my home was about to become a battleground. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour overnight shift at the local hospital, where I work as an ICU nurse. The only thing on my mind was my couch and a few precious hours of sleep. I was mentally drained and physically sore, with a dull ache starting at my lower back and radiating up to my shoulders. But as I turned onto my quiet suburban street that morning, something in my driveway made me slam on the brakes. A strange silver SUV was parked right there, smack in the middle of my driveway. My driveway. At first, I thought maybe it was a medical emergency or someone had car trouble and needed a spot to pull over. But there was no note, no neighbor standing by looking guilty, nothing. Just that SUV, as if it belonged there. Frustrated but hoping it was a simple mistake, I found a spot on the street and carefully slid in, already annoyed at how rare street parking was in our neighborhood. I got out, scribbled a quick, polite note. "Hi, this is private property. Please don't park here again. Thanks." I tucked it under the windshield wiper, then trudged inside, heart pounding from the unexpected confrontation. My dad, who's in his late 70s and struggles with mobility issues, was staying with me for a few days. He depended on my driveway's easy access to get in and out. The entire point of clearing that space was so I could help him safely. I dropped onto my couch, thinking maybe it was just a fluke. Little did I know that SUV was about to be the start of something far more frustrating. I woke up a few hours later, still groggy from my night shift, to find the SUV still in my driveway. My polite note had been crumpled and tossed into the nearby bushes. That's when my blood started to boil. I had to leave soon for an appointment with my dad's doctor, so I needed my driveway clear in case I had to help him walk out with his cane. Irritated, I wrote a second note, this time firmer. "This is private property. Do not park here. Final warning." I placed it on the windshield again, figuring that surely the driver would take the hint. But life never seems to go the way you plan, does it? The next morning, bright and early, I walked outside for a quick grocery run and found that same SUV lurking there, as if it had every right to my driveway. My final warning had been shredded into pieces and scattered on the ground. I stood there, adrenaline spiking through me. I was done playing nice. My elderly dad needed an easy route to the door. Why on earth was some random person ignoring basic courtesy? Was this a neighbor's guest? A stranger who thought my driveway was public domain? That's when I decided enough was enough. A day later, I mustered up the energy to confront whoever owned that SUV directly. My first chance came early in the morning. I was outside, studying the offending vehicle, trying to figure out if I could legally have it towed without confrontation. Just then, I noticed a figure emerging from the house across the street. Karen Thompson, the newly elected HOA president. She had that trademark HOA leader look. Angled blonde bob, crisp white blouse, and a permanent scowl that seemed etched onto her face. I'd heard stories about her from neighbors, rumors of her being overly strict, harassing people about minor yard infractions, and sending violation notices for grass that was half an inch too tall. But I never had a reason to talk to her, until now. Karen marched straight toward me, eyes laser-focused on my face. "What are you doing near my car?" she snapped, her voice echoing through the quiet morning air. My eyebrows shot up. Her car? This woman was the one who had been parking in my driveway this whole time? My exhaustion-fueled frustration boiled over. "Your car," I repeated, crossing my arms. "You've been blocking my driveway for days. I've left notes. You ignored them. My father has mobility issues. He needs this space." She scoffed, rolling her eyes as if I was overreacting. "I'm the HOA president. I have certain privileges. You should be grateful I'm even allowing you to live here without fines." I blinked, stunned by her audacity. "Allowing me? I own my house. This is private property." Karen shrugged. "That's up for debate. HOA rules state that driveways are considered communal if necessary. I need that space for guest parking." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's not how property rights work," I said firmly. "Move your car. Now." She smirked. "Or what? You'll call the cops? Go ahead. See how far that gets you." I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone, and, within minutes, a tow truck was on the way. Karen's smirk vanished as soon as she realized I wasn't bluffing. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "Watch me," I replied coolly. As the tow truck driver hooked up her SUV, Karen shrieked and threatened to call the HOA board. But as it turned out, she was the only one who thought she had the right to my driveway. The board members wanted no part in her antics. The best part? She had to pay a hefty fine to get her car back. And from that day forward, she never parked in my driveway again. The driver who had been hijacking my driveway stood before me, arms crossed, an infuriating smirk on her face. I struggled to stay calm. "Is this your SUV?" I asked, forcing politeness into my tone. Debbie Miller, the neighborhood HOA president, gave a casual shrug. "Yes, street parking here is ridiculous, and I have important HOA business. So I use your driveway sometimes. It's not like you need it constantly." My jaw tightened. "But you're parking on my property without permission, and you've ignored my notes. I have an elderly father who needs easy access." She let out a derisive snort. "Look, I'm the HOA president. I know all the rules. You don't own this street." She jabbed a finger at my driveway. "Besides, if it were such a big deal, you would have spoken to me sooner." I felt my cheeks flush. I tried, politely, "Through the notes you threw away." Debbie shrugged, stepping into her SUV. "If you want me gone, you'll have to do more than scribble on scraps of paper." Then she slammed the door and reversed out with a squeal of tires. For the next few days, Debbie actually stayed away. I thought maybe she had gotten the message. My father was relieved. No more precarious maneuvering on the street. But sure enough, peace lasted less than a week. One evening, I returned from yet another exhausting ICU shift to find Debbie's SUV not only in my driveway, but parked so aggressively that it blocked the ramp I'd installed for my dad's walker. He was inside, but if he needed to leave in an emergency, we'd be trapped. Furious, I stomped across the street, heart pounding, and hammered on Debbie's door. Her porch light flicked on. She opened the door with a look that practically screamed, "You again?" "You blocked my dad's access ramp," I said, trying not to yell. "He can't get out." She rolled her eyes as if I were complaining about a lost sock. "Your father can just walk around it. Let's be honest, you're making a huge deal out of nothing." I clenched my fists, counting to 3 in my head. "He's elderly. He uses a walker. That's not nothing. Move your car." She sighed, the biggest, most dramatic sigh I'd ever seen. "Fine. But know this. As HOA president, I can make your life very complicated if you keep harassing me." Then she slammed the door in my face. Minutes later, she moved her SUV. But as I stood in my driveway, staring at the oil stain she left behind, my stomach churned at her thinly veiled threat. The next morning, my dad's home nurse arrived for a scheduled visit. We were in the living room discussing his medications when I heard a loud thud outside. I rushed to the window. Debbie was back, adjusting something near our mailbox. I stepped outside, confusion turning to alarm. A bright pink notice was stuck to my mailbox, an HOA violation. It accused me of storing hazardous materials in my driveway, clearly referring to the oil stains from her SUV. "You can't fine me for something you caused," I snapped, grabbing the notice. "This is insane." Debbie stared me down. "Watch me. As president, I can issue citations for any violation of neighborhood standards. An oily driveway definitely qualifies." I could hardly believe her nerve. "That's from your car leaking. You're the one." She cut me off with a condescending wave. "It's your property. You're responsible for keeping it clean. End of story. Fix it by next week or face a fine." My hands shook. My dad's nurse stepped outside, concern etched on her face. "Is everything okay?" Debbie shot her a glare and pivoted away without a word. Humiliated, I felt cornered, outraged, and deeply worried about how this stress would affect my father. Enough warnings. Enough heated exchanges. Debbie was escalating, so I started thinking, what are my legal options? That afternoon, still fuming, I called Dan Mitchell, a friend from college who now worked at a local law firm specializing in property disputes and HOA conflicts. After hearing my story, he practically coughed in disbelief. "This is a direct trespassing issue," Dan said. "She has zero right to park in your driveway without permission, HOA president or not. If it happens again." The next day, Debbie was back. This time, she wasn't just blocking my driveway. She had parked on my lawn. That was the last straw. I took photos, documented everything, and called a tow company. As the truck arrived, Debbie stormed out of her house, shouting, "You can't tow my car. I have HOA business." "You're trespassing," I said, arms crossed. "You've been warned. Now, you can deal with the consequences." The tow truck driver barely glanced at her as he hitched up her SUV. Debbie's face turned red with rage. "This isn't over," she screeched. I just smiled. "We'll see." A few days later, she attempted to find me again, but this time, I was ready. Dan helped me draft a cease and desist letter, citing harassment, trespassing, and abuse of power. I sent copies to the HOA board and the city council. Word spread fast. Other neighbors, tired of Debbie's antics, started speaking up. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she had been harassing. Within weeks, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Residents voted overwhelmingly to remove Debbie as president. It was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. As for me, I never saw Debbie's SUV in my driveway again. But every time I spotted an oil stain on the pavement, I smiled, because I knew I had won. Again, you can have her towed. It's legally within your rights as the homeowner, Dan reassured me. But she's the HOA president, I repeated, my voice low. She claims she can get me in trouble with fines or something. Dan chuckled. The HOA can't override private property laws. Also, if she's threatening you, that's harassment. Keep records, photos, notes, timestamps. If you have proof, calling a tow company is completely valid. Trust me, I've seen this scenario 100 times. That phone call lit a fire under me. I had tried patience, warning notes, personal confrontations, but Debbie had ignored every effort. My father's safety was at stake. The next time her SUV showed up on my driveway, I did exactly what Dan suggested. I didn't have to wait long. A few days later, I came home from a short grocery run to find Debbie's SUV gleaming in the sun, parked in my driveway like she owned it. My father was expecting a home health aide that afternoon, and we needed easy access to the front door. That was it. I had the number of a local tow company on speed dial. Snapping a few quick photos of her SUV blocking the walkway, I dialed. "Yes, I have an unauthorized vehicle on my property," I told the dispatcher, calmly giving them my address. They arrived shockingly fast. Watching the tow truck hook up Debbie's precious SUV was oddly therapeutic. My heart pounded with a mixture of nerves and satisfaction. I'm doing the right thing, I told myself. She left me no choice. 20 minutes later, the SUV was gone. I hovered by the window, half expecting Debbie to appear in a fury, but she never did. I finally exhaled, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this public humiliation would end her brazen parking habits. Later that evening, boom, 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 a furious pounding on my front door nearly made me spill my drink. Here we go. I opened the door to find Debbie standing there, face beet red, clutching her phone like a weapon. "You towed my car," she screeched, practically shaking. I leaned against the doorframe, staying calm. "Yep, you parked in my driveway again." Debbie's chest heaved as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "That was illegal. I had important HOA documents in there. You can't just steal my car." I raised an eyebrow. "Illegal? No. You were trespassing. I warned you multiple times." Her nostrils flared. "I am the HOA president. I was on official business. You had no right." I exhaled sharply. "And being HOA president means what? You get VIP parking in my driveway?" Newsflash. HOA rules don't override private property laws. Debbie's mouth opened and closed as her mind scrambled for a counter. Then, as if struck by a brilliant idea, she whipped out her phone. "Fine. I'm calling the police. You're harassing me." She punched in the number with shaking hands. I shrugged. "Go ahead. I'll wait." 15 tense minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Debbie ran toward them like they were her personal backup team. "Officers, thank God you're here. He had my car towed for no reason. This is theft." The taller officer, Reynolds, sighed. "Ma'am, slow down. What exactly happened?" Debbie pointed wildly at me. "He took my car. I was parked here because there's never street parking. I have important HOA duties, and he's been harassing me." Reynolds turned to me. "Sir, did you have the car towed?" I nodded, showing my photo evidence of her SUV parked in my driveway multiple times. Reynolds barely glanced at Debbie before saying, "Ma'am, a driveway is private property. He has the legal right to remove unauthorized vehicles." Debbie's face went pale, then twisted in rage. "No, that can't be right. I'm the HOA president." The second officer, Martinez, let out a tired sigh. "Ma'am, that doesn't give you the right to park on someone else's property. If you want your car back, you'll need to pay the towing fee." Debbie gasped so dramatically I thought she might pass out. "Pay? You expect me to pay for this?" Reynolds crossed his arms. That's how towing works. Debbie's hands shook with fury. This is a conspiracy. You're taking his side. Martinez narrowed his eyes. Ma'am, you called us for illegal towing. If you make another false report, you could be charged. Debbie's breath hitched. Her eyes darted between the officers and me, realizing she had lost. Huffing, she spun on her heel and stormed off. Reynolds turned to me, shaking his head. Let us know if she tries this again. I nodded. Will do. The officers left. I locked my door, finally allowing myself to relax. The battle wasn't over, but tonight? Tonight, I had won. Hitched, she realized she had lost. Desperate, she turned back to Reynolds. So that's it. You're just going to let him get away with this? He should be arrested. What kind of cops are you? Do you even know who I am? I control this entire neighborhood. If I say someone is breaking the rules, you listen. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, the law doesn't care who you are. It's his driveway, his property, and his rights. I suggest you start reading the laws instead of trying to make them up. Maggie, Harris's face twisted with fury, her fists clenching like she wanted to throw something. She turned, shooting me the nastiest glare I had ever seen. You'll pay for this. This isn't over. I smirked. Oh, I'm sure it's not. With that, she stormed off. The officers gave me a knowing nod before leaving. I exhaled, finally enjoying the peace of a Maggie-free driveway, for now. For about a week, Maggie vanished from my driveway. She avoided me, only casting dirty looks whenever we ended up outside at the same time. I naively thought that was the end of it. I poured my energy back into caring for my father, who had an upcoming surgery. Meanwhile, I tried to keep up with my hospital shifts, which were physically and emotionally draining. The last thing I needed was more drama from Maggie, but drama has a way of finding you when the other person craves conflict. One calm Saturday morning, I woke up planning to take Dad to a follow-up appointment. I opened the curtains, and my jaw dropped. Not only was Maggie's SUV back in my driveway, but she had a second car parked behind it, totally blocking me in. The nerve. I rushed outside, furious but also worried. Dad's appointment was in 2 hours. I didn't have time for Maggie's nonsense. The second vehicle was a smaller sedan, presumably belonging to one of Maggie's friends or family members. Why on earth did she think my driveway was a communal lot? My father came to the door, leaning on his walker. Everything okay, son? I clenched my fists, trying to remain calm. Maggie's at it again, Dad. She parked 2 cars this time. He sighed, shaking his head. That woman has no respect. I placed a supportive arm around him. Don't worry, I'll handle it. I tried knocking on Maggie's door again. No answer. I called out, even asked a neighbor if she was home. Nobody had seen her. She was either ignoring me or genuinely not around. Either way, I had to do something. My father needed an unobstructed path to the car. Dan's advice echoed in my head. You can legally tow any vehicle parked on your property without permission. So that's what I did. I called the tow company again, explaining we now had 2 unauthorized cars in my driveway. They chuckled, remembering my last call, and said they'd send 2 trucks right away. Within 30 minutes, both trucks arrived. The drivers shook their heads, amused at how blatantly these vehicles were blocking me. They hooked up Maggie's SUV first, then the sedan. I felt a pang of nervousness. Maggie was going to explode, but I also felt relief. She had shown zero respect for my property or my dad's condition. Enough was enough. Watching those tow trucks drive off with both cars was almost surreal. The adrenaline rush left me shaky, but inside, I felt vindicated. Let Maggie try to spin this any way she wanted. The law was on my side. The meltdown came 2 hours later, right on schedule. I was helping Dad finish his physical therapy routine in the living room when we heard a car screech to a halt outside. Through the window, I saw Maggie practically sprinting up my driveway, face twisted in rage, phone pressed to her ear. I walked onto the porch, bracing for impact. "Where is my car?" she yelled, voice cracking as she pointed an accusatory finger at me. "Both of your cars were towed," I said matter-of-factly. "Parking in my driveway is trespassing. I'm done playing nice." The look on her face was pure shock and fury. "You, how dare you? I'm the HOA president. This is harassment. I'm calling the cops." She started pacing in circles, babbling into her phone about abuse of power and outrageous treatment. But I just folded my arms and waited. We'd been through this before. If she called the police, they would tell her the same thing. It was my property, my rights, and she had no authority over me. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Reynolds stepped out, his expression already tired. "Ms. Harris, we've discussed this before. Your HOA regulations do not override private property laws. If you continue harassing Mr. Hayes, you may face legal consequences yourself." Maggie opened and closed her mouth like a fish, clearly at a loss for words. Then, with a final huff, she spun on her heel and stormed back to her house. Reynolds gave me a nod. "Let us know if she tries this again." "Will do." As the patrol car drove away, I let out a deep breath. My father patted my shoulder. "I think you finally got through to her." I chuckled. "We'll see. For now, at least, I had one. And my driveway was finally mine again." Margaret Maggie Harris was livid, spit flying from her lips as she shouted into her phone, demanding the police arrive immediately. My father, peeking through the doorway, shook his head in disbelief. When the officers arrived, it was the same pair as before. Maggie stormed toward them, waving her hands wildly in my direction. "He's had my cars towed twice. This has to be illegal. Arrest him." One officer sighed and turned to me. "Do you have pictures again?" I nodded, holding up my phone. Both vehicles were parked in my private driveway without permission, completely blocking us in. Just like last time. The officer looked back at Maggie, his tone calm but firm. "Ma'am, as we've already explained, he's within his rights to tow unauthorized vehicles from his property." Maggie let out a strangled cry. "But I'm the HOA president. That doesn't give you the right to park wherever you want," the officer replied, unfazed. She began hyperventilating, her voice climbing in pitch. "He's ruining my life. I'll bury him in HOA fines. He'll regret this forever." The officers exchanged tired glances, clearly eager to wrap up the paperwork and leave. Meanwhile, I stood with my arms crossed, letting Maggie hurl her threats like daggers. She was so enraged, she could barely form a coherent sentence. Her meltdown peaked when she realized that both cars had already been taken to the impound lot. She'd have to pay the towing and storage fees for not one, but two vehicles. I had never seen anyone so furious. She practically shook with rage, her face red, eyes glistening with frustrated tears as reality set in. There was no quick fix. One officer cleared his throat and said, in the most professional tone possible, "There's no crime committed here. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one." And with that, they left, leaving Maggie standing in full meltdown mode. Maggie whirled around, her glare locked onto me, voice trembling with fury. "I hope you're happy," she spat, stepping closer, ignoring my father, who was still watching from the doorway. "You've made an enemy you can't handle." I stayed silent, my heart pounding but my expression neutral. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, imagining her embarrassment. But mostly, I was just exhausted. All I had done was defend my property and protect my father's well-being. Maggie's phone rang. Probably the impound lot calling about her fees. She glanced at the screen, muttering curses under her breath. Our eyes met again. I saw absolute fury but also something else. A dawning realization that she was powerless to change the situation. She started to say something, then bit her tongue. Pivoting on her heel, she stormed off my property, her shoulders shaking with anger. I watched her retreat, her furious scowl still etched into her face as she disappeared down the sidewalk. I exhaled a shaky breath and stepped back inside. My father placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You okay, son?" he asked, concern in his eyes. I just shook my head and leaned against the wall as the adrenaline wore off. Maggie's meltdown had been just as dramatic as I'd expected. And though I knew this wouldn't be our last confrontation, I also knew one thing for certain. This was a turning point in the HOA war. She had taken a stand, and so had I. But this time, the law was on my side. Standing up against injustice, a lesson in resilience. Life often presents challenges, and sometimes, those challenges come in the form of people who abuse their power. Whether it's an overreaching HOA, a corrupt official, or a bully in the neighborhood, one lesson remains true. Standing up for yourself and your community is always worth it. Many of us, especially older adults, have spent years working hard to build a home and a life of peace. No one should have to fight for the right to enjoy what they have rightfully earned. The stories of people pushing back against unfair HOA rules, corruption, and intimidation remind us that resilience and unity are powerful forces. When faced with injustice, gathering evidence, knowing your rights, and rallying with others can turn the tide. These stories also highlight an essential truth. Bullies thrive on fear, but they crumble when confronted with facts and courage. The fight may not be easy, but justice has a way of prevailing. Standing strong not only protects your home, but also ensures that the next generation inherits a fairer, more just world. So, whether it's an unfair HOA or any other form of wrongdoing, remember, your voice matters, and persistence leads to victory.